Many years ago, in the busy neighbourhood of Cayam, Lusaka, lived a couple everyone knew as the happy hour couple. Mosi and Moana believed that life was short and enjoyment was a must. And even when they had children, they carried them along and continued enjoying. From the beginning of their marriage, they were always the life of the party, laughing the loudest at weddings, dancing the widest at street carnivals, and never missing Friday nights at the local beer parlour in their neighbourhood. Everybody knew them. They were admired, and at the same time envied. Because no matter how hard life was biting others, Mosi and Moana always looked like people who had no problems. They didn't have much, but they had mastered how to make small money look big. Moana worked as a roadside mechanic, while Mosi braided hair under the mango tree beside their house. They had dreams like everyone else, but their biggest dream was to keep enjoying life, keep looking young and vibrant, and keep dancing like teenagers. So, when Mosi got pregnant with their first child, they boldly told everyone that the baby wouldn't change a thing. And truly, it didn't. Months later, when she gave birth to a baby girl named Tasha, they wrapped her in a colorful chenny cloth, strapped her to Mosi's back like a handbag, and went right back to the beer parlor. Sometimes they stayed till midnight. When asked whether it was okay to bring a baby to such a place, Mosi would laugh and say, "Tasha is used to noise. She even sleeps better with music." As Tasha grew, nothing changed. By the time she was 4, she could already sing along to the trending hip-hop songs in the bar. She had learned to twist her waist just like the women on TV. And when customers clapped and gave her sweets, she would dance even more. Mosi would proudly say, "My daughter is free and expressive. She will not grow up shy and timid like me." Then came their second child, Chimuka. And from the moment he could crawl, he was crawling around crates of beer and empty bottles. At just 2 years old, he already knew how to lift his father's glass and pretend to drink. Everyone in the bar found it hilarious. Someone once shouted, "This boy will follow in his father's footsteps." And Moana laughed, "He will even do more than me." To the outside world, it all looked like jokes and good vibes. Mosi and Moana kept saying, "At least we are together as a family. At least we are happy." And yes, they believed they were. Every Saturday morning, unlike other families who rested or visited the playground, Mosi and Moana would get dressed and go to their favorite spot in town, Number 9 Joint, a popular beer parlor. It became a family tradition. Tasha swayed her waist to local music, and Chimuka knew how to lift a glass without frowning. The first time he took a gulp, the joint roared with laughter. Tasha would dance to a full album of Chef 187, shaking her tiny waist while the adults clapped and shouted, "This girl will grow up to be a dancer. See talent." Mosi would beam with pride and say, "It's in our blood. I used to dance very well before marriage." Moana would nod. "We'll start taking her to dancing classes." But there were no dancing classes. What they meant was, they'd keep bringing her to the beer parlor to practice. Week after week, month after month, the same scene played out. Tasha became a regular. Chimuka would collect drinks from uncles and pretend to pour them, only to sneak behind and take a few sips. Adults said, "It's harmless fun. They'll outgrow it." But the children weren't outgrowing anything, they were learning, watching, and copying. Tasha began to notice how women in the joint dressed. She asked her mother why she didn't wear leggings or paint her face. Mosi laughed and said, "When you grow up a little, you'll start painting." Tasha started using red crayons as lipstick. Chimuka grew more restless. When they tried to keep him home, he would cry and throw things. One day, he took his father's beer into the room and shouted, "Give me my drink." He wasn't joking. Still, Mosi and Moana didn't stop. They said they were giving their children freedom, that they weren't strict parents, and that life was too short to carry everything on the head. And because society called irresponsibility flexing or wokeness, no one corrected them. They carried on. At one point, Mosi opened her own beer parlor. She used 10,000 kwacha sent by a friend to convert the front of their compound into a small bar. Plastic chairs, crates of beer, loud music, smoke, laughter, everything followed. But the biggest change wasn't the business. It was what it did to the children. By 10, Tasha no longer played with dolls. She served drinks after school and knew every customer's drink preference. 2 bottles of castle and roast goat meat, a customer would shout, and she would deliver, fast. Her mother would smile and say, "She's learning the business early." But what Tasha was really learning was that attention from men came with tips. That dancing for drunk uncles brought small cash. That being called sweet girl meant she was doing something right. Sometimes, when her mom was cooking, Tasha would sneak out back, use her mom's makeup, and practice twerking while watching music videos. Meanwhile, Chimuka was getting worse. At 8, he already had red eyes, not from sleeplessness, but from smoking wee-wee with older boys behind the bar. Nobody noticed when he started skipping school, when his grades dropped, or when he brought home stolen bags. Mosi was proud her bar was growing. Moana loved the attention. "My wife runs this thing like a man," he bragged. But they were blind to the cost. One Friday evening, a man tipped Tasha 5 kwacha. As she turned to go, he pulled her closer and whispered, "Come sit with me. You're the sweetest tonight." Mosi saw it, but said nothing. She only yelled, "Tasha, check the drinks in the freezer." Tasha ran off, confused and excited all at once. That weekend, Chimuka got into a fight with 2 boys behind the beer parlor. They accused him of stealing their weed. One pulled a broken bottle, and Chimuka, high and angry, swung a stool. Blood spilled. Screams followed. The matter went to the police station. Moana settled it with something small. But still, they didn't change. Nobody sat Chimuka down. They just told him to be careful next time. When Tasha turned 14, she changed. She stopped bathing before school. Wore sweaters in the heat. One afternoon, when her mom scolded her, she just stood trembling. "What is wrong with you?" her mother asked. "Nothing, Mommy," she mumbled. That night, she sat at the back of the house, holding her stomach, crying. She hadn't seen her period in 2 months, and didn't know who was responsible. She remembered 4 men. All regulars at the bar. One had tapped her backside. Another had offered sweets and lifted her skirt. Another had whispered inappropriate things while she served drinks. She was 14. But her innocence was long gone. One morning, while washing plates, she collapsed in the backyard. At the clinic, the nurse confirmed she was 3 months pregnant. Mosi's heart dropped. She looked at her daughter, silent and blank like a stone. "Who did this to you?" she asked. "I don't know," Tasha whispered. "It could be Uncle Ber, Uncle Joe, or the one who gives me biscuits." Mosi screamed. But none of the men accepted responsibility. Mosi cried in silence. Moana drank more. But now, the beer tasted bitter. The music felt meaningless. Because his daughter, his first baby, was carrying the child of a faceless customer. Meanwhile, Chimuka was now a street boy. Rumors said one of the boys he rolled with had a pistol. He skipped school, stole from people's homes, and smoked openly. Then one morning, there was a knock. "Your son has been arrested," the neighbor shouted. At the station, Chimuka sat with swollen eyes. In his pocket, weed, a penknife, and a stolen phone. The officer slammed the table. "You raised your kids in a bar and now you're shocked?" Moana couldn't speak. Mosi fell to her knees. "Please, we didn't know it had gotten this bad." The officer scoffed. "You didn't know?" Moana begged, "Please give us one more chance." The officer waved them off. "I'll release him, but let this be the last time." That night, Moana destroyed the bar. He broke bottles, smashed the freezer, and tore the banner. "This bar has destroyed us," he shouted. Neighbors gathered. Some pitied. Some mocked. But he didn't care. That night, he cried with Mosi. "We raised children in a nightclub and expected heavenly results. God, forgive us." The next day, silence filled their home. Tasha's belly was 6 months heavy. Nobody knew the father. DNA could only be done after birth. One of the suspects had already run to South Africa. Chamuka chewed his nails in silence, lost. Moana, desperate to save his family, went to church. A place he once mocked. He sat at the back, broken. The pastor saw him. "Your eyes are shouting louder than your mouth," he said. Moana poured out his soul. And the pastor told him, "A broken home is not always a cursed home, it's a calling to rebuild." That night, Moana and Mosi prayed for the first time. Clumsy but honest prayers. They sold what remained of the bar. Enrolled Tasha in a private maternity home. Mosi started therapy. Moana took Chamuka to youth rehab. It was hard. But slowly, things changed. One day, Chamuka asked, "Papa, if I change, will you be proud of me?" Moana hugged him tightly. Tasha gave birth to a baby girl. She stared at her newborn, blank. Mosi carried the child and wept, "You're innocent. I'll raise you right. You will never grow up in a bar." They planted vegetables where the bar once stood. No more loud music. No more strangers. Just peace. Tasha learned how to bake. Chamuka followed his father to work. And little by little, they started healing. Because even though they nearly lost it all, God gave them a second chance. And it's never too late to choose a new path.